Tower Bridge is perhaps the most photographed landmark in the world, a Victorian masterpiece of engineering that defines the London skyline. If you ask most tourists, or even most Londoners, how those massive 1,100-ton bascules were lifted for the better part of a century, they will likely guess steam engines or early electric motors. They would be wrong. For 82 years, from its opening in 1894 until 1976, the most iconic bridge on Earth was moved by the silent, invisible pressure of water coursing through cast iron pipes. This wasn't a self-contained system. It was a small node in a much larger, much more mysterious web. I stumbled upon this reality not in a history book, but in a dry, technical footnote within a 1950s infrastructure report. It mentioned a grid that didn't use electrons, but rather pressurized liquid. As I dug deeper, the scale of this forgotten energy network began to reveal itself, and frankly, the math doesn't add up with the narrative of progress we've been sold. We are told that history is a straight line of improvement, yet right beneath the pavement of London lies a 184-mile network of high-pressure mains that once powered the heartbeat of the British Empire. This was the London Hydraulic Power Company. At its peak, it was the largest system of its kind in the world, stretching from the docks in the east to the theatres of the West End. Millions of people walked over it every day, entirely unaware that beneath their boots, water was being kept at a constant, staggering pressure of 700 pounds per square inch. It powered the cranes that unloaded the world's wealth, the elevators of the finest hotels, and even the heavy security doors of the Bank of England. It was a ghost energy, silent, vibrationless, and incredibly potent. Why did a system of such immense scale and reliability simply vanish from our collective memory? To understand the present, we have to look at what we've buried. Once you see the true map of London's subterranean veins, you cannot unsee it. The standard historical narrative suggests that electricity arrived, and being the superior technology, immediately rendered all previous forms of power obsolete. It is a story of out with the old, in with the new. However, when you look at the archives of the LHPC, you find a different reality. This wasn't a brief transition, it was a 90-year parallel existence. The hydraulic network didn't fail in the face of the electric light bulb. In fact, it thrived alongside it, serving purposes that electricity, for a long time, simply couldn't handle safely or efficiently. Electricity in the late 19th and early 20th centuries was a chaotic, dangerous frontier. It was prone to surges, it caused devastating fires, and the risk of electrocution was a constant concern in the damp London climate. In contrast, the hydraulic system was inherently safe. There were no sparks to ignite the dust in the great warehouses of the London docks. There were no short circuits in the humid basement of the Savoy Hotel. Hydraulic power was cold energy. It was pure mechanical force, delivered through a liquid medium. The LHPC began its operations in 1883, and it didn't shut down until the late 1970s. For nearly a century, London was a hybrid city. While the streets were being lit by the first flickering electric lamps, the heavy lifting of the industrial world was still being done by the hydraulic grid. This suggests that the transition to electricity wasn't driven by a lack of capability in hydraulics, but by something else, a shift in how we value centralization and the cleanliness of the delivery method over the raw resilience of the system. The hydraulic network offered unique advantages. It was fireproof, it provided instant torque, and it was incredibly difficult to disrupt. If it was so effective, and if it coexisted with electricity for almost a century, why do we treat it today as a steampunk curiosity rather than a legitimate alternative to our modern, fragile grid? It's not a glitch in our history, it's a pattern of selective forgetting. To understand how London breathed, you have to understand the work of Edward B. Ellington, the visionary engineer behind the system. He didn't just lay pipes, he created a balanced, resonant organism. The core of this system was the accumulator. These weren't batteries in the chemical sense, but massive vertical cylinders containing a piston loaded with huge weights, often 80 to 100 tons of iron ore or slag. When the central pumping stations at Wapping, Rotherhithe, or Grosvenor Road pumped water into the network, these weights would rise. They were storing potential energy. When a crane at the docks needed to lift a heavy crate, or a theatre in the West End needed to raise a massive iron safety curtain, the weight in the accumulator would drop, forcing the water through the pipes with immense, consistent pressure. This created a system of perfect resonance. The accumulators acted like shock absorbers for the entire city, smoothing out the peaks and troughs of energy demand. It was a distributed network of stored physical force. The math doesn't add up when you compare the efficiency of this direct mechanical transfer to the early electric systems. To get mechanical work from electricity, you have to convert heat to steam, steam to rotation, rotation to electrons, transport those electrons with massive losses over wires, and then convert them back into rotation or movement via a motor. The hydraulic system bypassed the middleman. It sent the movement itself through the pipes. It was a system built on stability and physical law, rather than the volatile behavior of electromagnetic fields. It was a hard system in a world that was becoming increasingly soft. This was the ghost energy, a rhythmic, pulsing pressure that kept the city's heaviest machinery moving with the silence of a heartbeat. It was an infrastructure designed for the long term, built with cast iron and heavy stone, meant to last for centuries, not decades. The ultimate proof of the hydraulic system's superiority in terms of resilience came during the darkest days of the 20th century. In 1940, during the Blitz, London was subjected to a level of destruction that would have collapsed any modern city. The electric grid was a primary casualty. Power stations were targeted, and overhead wires were severed by shrapnel and falling masonry. When the electricity went out, the city's modern functions, lights, communications, electric pumps ceased, but the hydraulic system was different. Because the pipes were buried deep beneath the streets and made of thick, heavy cast iron, they were largely immune to the chaos on the surface. More importantly, the system was distributed. It didn't rely on a single, fragile point of failure. During the height of the bombings, when the electric infrastructure was failing daily, the hydraulic presses on Fleet Street continued to run. The newspapers, the vital lifelines of information for a besieged nation, were printed using the pressure from the LHPC. The elevators in hospitals and government bunkers kept moving. This is where the pattern becomes impossible to ignore. We are told that we centralize our energy for efficiency, yet centralization is the very thing that makes us vulnerable. The hydraulic system of 1940 proved that a distributed, high-pressure mechanical network could survive a total war that crippled its modern electric counterpart. It was a system that thrived on the very pressure that sought to destroy it. It didn't require complex cooling systems or sensitive transformers. It required only the physical integrity of the pipes and the gravity of the accumulators. This resilience wasn't an accident, it was an inherent quality of the technology. And yet, after the war, instead of learning from this survival, the push toward total electrification only intensified. We traded a nearly indestructible physical grid for a fragile, centralized web of copper and glass. The end of the London Hydraulic Power Company didn't come with a spectacular failure or a technological breakthrough that made it obsolete overnight. It happened quietly, almost surgically, in 1977. At the time of its closure, the system was still working perfectly. The pipes were pressurized, the accumulators were weighted, and the machines were turning. It was decommissioned not because it was broken, but because the living knowledge of how to run it was being intentionally phased out. When the valves were finally turned for the last time, London lost more than just a power source. It lost a specialized form of engineering wisdom. Operating a citywide hydraulic grid is an art of balance, managing pressure waves, preventing water hammer effects, and maintaining the delicate equilibrium of the accumulators. Within just 15 years of the shutdown, that expertise had effectively evaporated. The engineers retired, the manuals were archived or lost, and the physical reality of the network began to fade into the realm of urban legend. This is the point of erasure. It is how a technology that powered the world's greatest city for a century becomes a footnote in a few decades. The infrastructure didn't rot, it was simply switched off and left in place. We are taught that technologies die because they are no longer useful, but the LHPC was killed while it was still at peak performance. This raises a haunting question. Why? Why abandon a system that had proven its resilience during a world war, that was fireproof, and that was already fully built and paid for? The official reason was the rising cost of maintaining the Victorian pipework, but the math doesn't add up when you consider the cost of building the entire electric infrastructure from scratch. It wasn't an economic decision, it was a paradigm shift. We chose to move away from a technology we could touch and feel, toward one that exists in the realm of the invisible and the centralized. Today, if you look at a modern map of London's utility infrastructure, the 184 miles of hydraulic mains are gone. They have been erased from the official cartography of the city, but they didn't go anywhere. The iron pipes are still there, deep under the asphalt of the Strand, under the banks of the Thames, and beneath the foundations of the city's skyscrapers. In a strange twist of irony, Many of these pipes were purchased by Mercury Communications in the 1980s and are now used as conduits for fiber optic cables. We have literally replaced the energy of physical pressure with the energy of information. We use the veins of a mechanical giant to pulse data across the globe, but in doing so, we have moved into a state of extreme vulnerability. Our modern life depends on a centralized electric grid that is susceptible to cyberattacks, solar flares, and physical sabotage, the very things the hydraulic system was immune to. We chose the advanced system, yet we live in constant fear of its failure. The hydraulic pipes of London are a reminder that there was another way. There was a time when a city's energy was as tangible as the water in a tap, as reliable as gravity, and as resilient as cast iron. We are surrounded by the remnants of a more robust civilization, hidden in plain sight. We see the pumping station at Wapping, now converted into an arts centre, or the elevators at the Savoy, now powered by electric motors, and we think we are looking at progress. But perhaps we are looking at a detour. Why did we choose a vulnerable centralization over a proven, distributed reliability? It's a question that the modern world isn't prepared to answer, because to answer it would be to admit that we have traded security for convenience. The pipes remain, silent and empty, a ghost network waiting for a pressure that will never return. The math of our history remains unsolved. The pattern is clear for those who care to look, but for the rest, the secret is safe beneath the streets. The pressure is gone, only words remain.